All right, today I'm going to go over cuts and relays that we use in both our baseball and softball programs, and just trying to diagram it so it's a little easier for our players to know where they're supposed to go. So we're going to start with nobody on base with a single to the outfield. If we have a single that's hit directly to one of our outfielders where there's not really a chance for the person to take two on it, typically what would happen is if it's hit on right field side, our second baseman would uh, go out a little bit and be a cutoff where they could just toss it to them. Or if it's on this side, it would be the shortstop who would go out a little bit and he would serve as the cutoff to second. They just toss it to them. We want them to make sure that they make it a fairly firm throw, though, because we don't want guys to take off for second because of a lob into our second baseman or our shortstop. So they get it to him firmly and obviously in line with second base, so that if there's a bad throw there, then you've got the shortstop backing up the throw from right to that second baseman, and vice versa. The shortstop would be in line here and the second baseman there. If it was overthrown, obviously this guy's back there to back that up. So that's what happens on a single to the outfield. If it's to center field, if it's on this side of the field, then the second baseman would be covering second base. Shortstop goes out. If it's on this side of second base, then the shortstop covers second and the second baseman goes out. Singles where it's away from the outfielder, where the batter is seriously contemplating trying to take two, we really want our outfielders to be able to make that firm throw all the way to second if possible. But again, we will have our second baseman be in line if there needs to be a cut, particularly on a ball maybe that was hit right down this right field line, with that longer throw, or right down the left field line on this side. Then our second baseman and our shortstop might have to go out a little bit further to serve as a cut, depending on the strength of that player's arm. But they got to throw it as if they're trying to get it through their head on one bounce to second base, so they can get that person if they do try to take two. Obviously, it takes less time for it to get all the way there without a cut if it can be on line and thrown hard. So, and in the gap, obviously, the same thing can happen. So that's on a single. That's what we do with our cuts with nobody on. With a runner on first, our shortstop will always be the cut to third. If it's to right field, that's the longest throw. Our shortstop will typically come somewhere just, so he's not in the way of a base runner running there, but just in a place where he can get to that cut, depending on how far that throw is. Obviously, if it's down the right field line, he's going to have to go out a little further. If it was right at the guy, he might be able to scoot back into here somewhere for that throw to third. If it's the center field, he would likely be somewhere in here, where a throw through his head would be one bounce into third base. And then if it's to left, there may not even need to be a cut because it's such a short throw, but he'll go ahead and get in line with that in case there's no need to throw there because the guy stops at second, or if it happened to be in the gap or whatever and we do actually need a cut, he can be in line for that cut to third. So shortstop always the cut on a single with a runner on first with the possibility of going to third. Now with a runner on second with a single, the potential play is at home, and that's where things get a little bit more complicated. We don't feel like our first baseman has time to get all the way over here on a single hit to left to be a cut to home. So in the singles that are hit to our left fielder, our third baseman will scoot back in here about 70 feet, 65 feet away from home plate to be the cut to home. When that third baseman comes there, then we need somebody to cover third. So then our shortstop comes around and covers third. Second baseman covers second, and our first baseman will come inside, watch to see if the runner hits the base. We always have them check that, and then come in behind in case any of the runners go too far before they stop, and we can get them in a rundown. So we've got all the bases covered. Third baseman's the cut. A throw through their head should be one bounce right to our catcher. That's why we go about 60 to 70 feet, but they have to adjust based upon how far their outfielder was away when they got the ball. Obviously, the further they're out and the strength of their arm will determine whether they got to come out further or not. So that's single to left. If the single is to center or right, now our first baseman does have time to become the cut on that. So if it's to center, our first baseman would sprint in to here, just on the other side of the mound, to be the cut. Since he's not at first, now our second baseman will have to come in and around here in case a guy rounds too far. Our shortstop has coverage of second base, and our third baseman has coverage of third base. So all our bases are covered again. Again, this guy's about 65, 70 feet away from home, from center field. If it's from right field, he'll be over here somewhere, but about the same distance away from home. A good strong throw through their head should be about one bounce right to our catcher. So that is all of the singles and coverage for cuts that we have on singles. Now, doubles are balls that get past our outfielders to the wall. If it's a baseball field, and most baseball fields are fairly large, we use what we call a double cut tandem relay. And so what happens on that, if it gets deep to right field and there's nobody on base, we are going to send our second baseman out first to a point where he's about 100 feet away from the person who's picking up the ball and throwing. We're going to send our shortstop right behind him, about 15 to 20 feet behind him, because we want that outfielder to pick it up and just throw it, and it might not be accurate to the first guy. And if it isn't, if it's too high, it should come down to this second guy right here. If it's too low or it's just going to handcuff this guy, he just gets out of the way and it ends up being one bouncer to this guy that he can catch in rhythm to relay to third. This is with nobody on. That obviously we're going to be lining up towards third for that to happen. The reason why we bring the second guy out is if he misses that first guy, there's nobody here, and that ball could roll forever, and a guy could get extra base or two sometimes because there's nobody there behind him to get that. So that's what we're going to do. In left center, or anything on the left side of second base that gets to the wall, our shortstop will be the first one in line. The second baseman would come behind him. Where this gets really tricky is on balls clear down the line. If it was down the right field line to the wall, obviously our second baseman's going clear out there, but a shortstop's got to really hustle to get over there to be the second guy in line. Same thing on this side. Shortstop would be the first one out. Second baseman's got to hustle to be the second person behind for that possible throw into third base. And that was with nobody on that we're looking at with that. On softball fields, we do not use the double cut, or on a baseball field that maybe is really small, we would just send out the one guy because now he's not going to be so far out, and an overthrow would be right into the infield area where somebody could probably get to it pretty easily. So we would just send the second baseman out to be the cut and the shortstop out to be the cut here. Now, if there was a runner on first when the double was hit, now we have a potential play at home. So that incorporates a few more players in this. Again, if it is on the right side in a big baseball field, we're going to send out the double cut relay with these guys, but we're going to have an additional first baseman who's going to come in and be an additional cut. So we might have our relay guy all the way out here in the outfield, about 100 feet away from where that throw is coming. Sorry, pen's not working. And then as that throw is coming in, they have another relay here with the first baseman to possibly throw that to home. Or as they throw it in, maybe we don't have the guy at home, so the catcher yells, cut 3, so this first baseman can cut it and throw to 3. In that case, our third baseman's still there. Our shortstop's got, well, the shortstop's going to be out there. We wouldn't have any coverage of this particular base because our pitch will be backing up. So second base isn't going to be covered unless an outfielder can hustle to that spot to be the extra guy there. When there was nobody on, our first baseman doesn't have this cut responsibility. So he watches the runner hit the base and then follows him to second and becomes a guy here at second in case the guy rounds too far at second. But he's not going to be available with a runner on first. So in that case, we're just going to leave second open unless there's an off outfielder who can get there to that spot. And so that's the double cut relay. If it's a small softball field, again, it's just going to be one of these fielders out here. The other one can take second base, and we don't need the other outfielder to be there just because we're only sending one guy out in that case to be the cut there. So those are our primary cuts and relays and where our guys go on those.